Welcome everybody to Real Talk with Casey and JoJo. What's up, Casey?
JoJo, what up?
Today we have a special guest. We have Nicole Janton here, and we are going to basically talk real talk about spiritual awakenings because that's what we're doing this season. So, welcome, Nicole. So
Hello.
glad you're here. I wanted to basically have you let everybody know a little bit about yourself, and then also kind of when did your shift begin? When did you start feeling a shift in your energy? Like, but first, what's your background? Just to give everybody a little something about you.
Yeah, so when I was a kid, actually, I guess I was more awakened as a kid, and then I went through a period of more getting into the shadow. So, long story short, when I was a little kid, I could see spirits and like communicate with spirits. So this was a whole thing. But eventually my anxiety took over and it became extremely overwhelming. And so I really just shut that all down. I became an atheist, didn't believe in anything. I was quite in a dark place, experiencing generalized depression, OCD, anxiety, almost all of the things that they could possibly diagnose me with. They kind of said that I could potentially have schizophrenia when I got older because I had that mixture of the anxiety and the depression and this like hearing voices type of situation. And so for a long time, I just sort of tried to numb myself out because it was really overwhelming, right? To be in the world, to be in my body, to be in my mind. And I really didn't even think I would make it to the age of 25, which I'm at now. So it's like been a long journey to this point. And so basically when I started to reawaken, it was really when I was studying recreation therapy. I stumbled upon the book by Eckhart Tolle, A New Earth. And within this book, the line that really struck home with me was where he started to talk about like, if I can't live with myself, then there must be a difference between me and myself. And this really just awakened me to this whole thing where it was like, okay, I can't live with myself, but that doesn't mean that I have to leave this body or leave this human experience to have a new experience. And it allowed me to view my anxiety from a whole different view, as opposed to being this like all-encompassing diagnosis or disorder that I was going through, and to being able to see it more as a human experience. And so from this place, I was able to, I guess, come to a lot more better understanding and ability to manage my anxiety. And it also began like a whole stream of awakening, which we can dive into.
Right. Wow. And that happens so much because as children we're so wide awake, right? We're so like in tune with the non-physical, and then comes the suppressing and the numbing and trying to fit into society and your parents and the teachers and everybody just trying to mold you into something that you're not. And so therefore we end up not really being our individual selves or authentic, and we just try to blend into everything else, and we lose who we are until we are tired of it and we're like, fuck this, I want to be myself again. When do you feel like you came back to that point? Like, was it recent? Like, when did you feel like you had like when we were looking through your Instagram, right? Because he was like, let me see. And there was like a shift, right? In the way like you're posting and everything. So like, do you feel that maybe after 2020, everything kind of started to shift again? Or do you feel like anything that was going on in our society had anything to do with you coming back to that feeling?
Oh, for sure. So in 2020, so basically when I read that book, it was like a couple years prior. I want to say maybe like 2018, 2017. And from there, I started getting a deeper understanding of myself and my mind and my body as separate things, but I wasn't really diving into the spirituality side of things yet. Honestly, I was kind of, I guess, afraid to dive into that stuff because I had a negative experience in Catholic school of being like rejected by the church because I hadn't been baptized. And it was sort of this whole story that made me almost like hate religion and try to push away that spiritual aspect of myself. But when 2020 hit, I was working in long-term care. And so I was actually one of the first ever people to get the vaccine. I was like pretty much forced to get the vaccine. Not to say that they forced me, but it was heavily
Persuaded.
persuaded.
Mm-hmm.
And so at that time, I started to really see things falling apart. And I really didn't think that the system was working how I wanted it to be. I had patients who were passing away and their families weren't even allowed to come in and see them, never mind hug them. And I was like, just starting to, I guess, not fully appreciate the structure of the healthcare system. And I just knew there was something more. And while I was in my dream job, like I really loved working with these patients with dementia, the whole atmosphere had changed. And I just had this feeling deep within me that there was something more for me and I wanted to make a bigger impact. And so I ended up getting into the online space. And to begin with, like, I didn't want to get into coaching or anything right away. I just wanted to like help somebody else to increase their impact. And so through the work that I was doing, I ended up just randomly on a sales call because that's what I was doing is high ticket sales. And one lady said to me, I don't know if you know this, but you're a star seed. And I had never heard of this term star seed before. But this sent me on a whole new path of awakening, of course. So after we hopped off that call, of course, I tried to like keep it on the lines of, all right, we're on the sales call. I'm like still talking about the thing. But that idea of starseed really stuck with me. And so when I hopped off the call and I went online and I started looking up starseed, I was like, what? Like all my experiences are being explained almost in one
Yeah.
place, right? Like I had this high anxiety, really empathic and intuitive to other people's emotions, so much that I was feeling theirs almost more than my own at times. This like big aversion to violence, a heavy fascination with space and the cosmos and all the things. Like ever since when I was a little kid, I was asking my mom, like, what's the meaning of life? And saying, I want to be an alien, not an astronaut, an alien. So it really all just was clicking one thing after the other. And so that led me down a whole stream of things, but really it led me down the path to find Dolores Cannon. And through finding her work, I ended up really being fascinated by her work with hypnotherapy and hypnosis. And so I ended up taking the training through Candace Craw Goldman, who like trained under Dolores Cannon and developed her own version of it called BQH, or Beyond Quantum Healing. And through doing these hypnosis sessions, I began to awaken to more of who I was and to my soul purpose. And I found a lot of relief from my anxiety from doing this awakening process. So it was huge.
And when was this?
This was in 2020.
Okay.
Actually, I guess it was more in 2021, like the end of 2020 towards the beginning of 2021.
And then you got married 2022?
22. Not just in 22, all the twos.
All the twos. And then how is that as far as like your spiritual awakening with, I'm beating you to it because you're not saying it.
So all my questions.
Well, because you're not saying them. So
no, that's a great question. And so when we first got engaged in February 2021, and we weren't like rushing the marriage part or anything. We'd been together for 7 years and we're like, we know we want to get married. But then when we knew the date 22222 was coming up, we're like, can't pass this up.
Yeah.
So
right.
it was like, planning's on, let's go. But through all of this awakening, at first my fiance, boyfriend at the beginning, fiance, and then turned husband was kind of like, okay, like, we both kind of grew up being like, okay, like witches stuff is off limits. Like, you don't talk about those kind of things, like energy, crystals, like is all seen as a little bit taboo. But overall, he's always been really open and, I guess understanding as much as he can. Like every time I learn something new, he's always open to hearing about it, even if he doesn't necessarily agree with it or is along the same wavelength. But overall, we've really been growing and developing together, maybe in our own directions. Like he's been awakening himself more, going through like, I guess, like Bob Proctor paradigm shift type things.
Okay.
And I've gone a little bit more like the woo route.
Right.
I guess you could say.
There's always the grounded one and the more energetic one, right? Yeah, he's the more grounded one, and
yeah, for sure. It's funny because you mentioned
we did
witches.
That too.
Like we're a little older, all right? We met 97, so I remember going into her room and seeing Wicca books, and I'm like, what was a Wicca book? And once I learned it was witches, I'm like, oh, okay, all right. And I was a little standoffish. I don't know if I've ever shared this with you.
No, never. I'm like surprised.
But I remember seeing that, and I'm like, okay.
You mean like the book that I was reading that was like
the chapter books? Yeah,
the chapter books.
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
And but at the same time, I mean, I just like you, I grew up in a church environment, and it didn't work for me. So I'm like, I was intrigued, I was interested. But I do have a question for you, because to kind of take it back, I'm curious, as your anxiety levels, right? Like as you opened up to other things, right? The things that you experienced, did you notice that your anxiety levels decreased the more you were willing to kind of confront the things that you were having anxiety about, if that makes sense?
Yeah. So as I become more aware of what was causing my anxiety, I guess I could say, that's how my awakening really helped me, was like the increased awareness that it gave me over the anxiety. So instead of seeing it as like something that was me and like, oh, I have anxiety, so that's why I'm reacting that way, I was able to sort of break it down further. And something that was really helpful for me was I found that in a lot of the traditional like therapies and through medicine, people would mainly focus on like three parts of it, which would be the stimulus, right? Like, how can we decrease or avoid the stimulus? Which, as an ambitious person who wants to like do the things, show up on the podcast, all those things, you can't just be like, oh no, I'm not going to approach this stimulus that makes me stressed out. And the other things they'd look at is like behavior, right? How can we modify your like behavioral response or your cognitive loop? But the thing is, without addressing the underlying energy or the emotions of it, all those things become so much more difficult. So by understanding like my energetic body and being able to release emotions and trauma on a deeper, more body level, instead of just seeing everything as like mental health, that really helped me to move through my anxiety. I hope that answers your question.
No, it does. And follow-up question. So your background's in medicine, a little bit,
Kind of.
kind
Yeah.
of, sort of.
So my background was in recreation therapy. So I worked in long-term care, but I'm not a
Okay.
medical doctor or anything like
But,
that.
but you have a pretty good understanding of the system, of medicine, of the ins and outs, right?
Yeah.
So had after everything you've gone through and as you've awakened more and more, has your opinion of the medical establishment changed?
Oh,
You,
like 1,000,000%.
would you be open to going more into that? I'd love to hear more
Yeah,
about that.
yeah. So, really, when I was younger, I would say whenever I had an issue with my body or my brain, I was like, I don't have the power to solve this. I need to go outside of me, because that's kind of what we're taught, right? Like,
Right.
oh, you feel the sniffles. Don't try to figure out what caused the sniffles. Just go to the doctor and they'll figure it out
Or
for
take
you.
this thing here, take that there. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I was really like, even before working in the medical field, I was heavily ingrained in the medical system because I was very accident prone. Like, as being somebody who is highly sensitive, it translated into physical stuff, like breaking all these bones, getting a bunch of sicknesses, having like unexplained bowel, like, digestive system issues, all those things. And so I was really used to going to the doctor for all of the answers and trusting them for these answers. And at the one point, what really, I guess, threw me off was I was starting to get better, I guess, get my like anxiety a little bit more under control. And I was on these antipsychotics at the time. And when I looked into what these antipsychotics do, I was like, wow, there's a lot of side effects in these that like nobody
Yeah.
ever really told me about. They're just like, take this thing, you'll be good. One of the things is you can't have babies on it. And I'm not 100% sure that I'm sold on having children. I don't have children yet, but I wasn't cool with the idea of having this decision made for me. Like, you're
Right.
going to be on this medication for life, so therefore you can't have kids. And so this sort of made me be like, maybe, medication's not the be all end all. I started to see it more as helping to treat the symptoms and maybe helping me to get to that point. But I knew there was higher levels that I could reach without just the medication. And I started to realize that we are really our own best healer, and the best people who can help you to heal are just going to like remove all the imbalances and almost like the clouds or the shit. I'm sorry if we're not allowed to swear, for lack of a better word.
Up.
Yeah, drop it.
Yeah, the shit that gets in the way of you healing yourself, instead of just, piling on other things and trying to trap it down until it explodes in the form of whatever that may be, anxiety attack or illness.
Yeah, and so agree, because like for me, I wanted to be a vet, right? And then we met, and then the whole plan changed. Thank God. But I wanted that, like I was big into science, like love science. And when I started to awaken myself, especially as we've gone through COVID, can I say that? I don't know if I can say that.
You can say
Especially
that.
as we've gone through that. My own respect for the medical establishment has diminished quite a bit, in much the same way that you describe it, right? Is that we don't, science in and of itself is into isolation and, like you said, the cause, the effect, but we're not looking at the system as a whole. We're not looking at the connectivity of the mind, body, and spirit, and truly servicing, the patients that most medical professionals take an oath to service, right? And so, for me personally, it's like opening the eyes up to that and thinking that, damn, Like
They don't have
I
our
was
best
on,
interest.
you know, I had acne really bad when I was a teenager and I took Accutane. Now that's nothing like what you experienced, but it's similar in the fact that Accutane required you to get blood work. Yeah, you had to go get blood work because it could damage your liver and your kidneys. Now, again, doctor didn't explain that to me. He just said, just come in and we'll do blood work and we'll tell you what's up. Okay, cool. Well, I started reading the handout and I'm like, oh shit. So I never took it at the level they prescribed me because I was fearful of
The
having
side
liver and
effects.
yeah, having liver and kidney damage. So like that was sort of when I opened my eyes up to hold up, like this, there's something wrong here. This isn't right. Now, once did the doctor ask me, hey, how much dairy do you eat? Right? Tell me about your diet. Tell me a little bit more about, you know, the things
Your
that,
stress.
right, the things that I know now could impact that, right? And you know, we have a 17-year-old son, and his isn't as bad, but he doesn't eat any dairy. He's vegan. He's vegetarian. Well, he's really vegan,
He's
right?
vegan now.
He's vegan, and his experience has been way far and beyond better than what I ever experienced, simply because of his diet, right?
Mm.
So yeah, so I mean, it's so cool to hear you say that because yeah, my whole opinion of the medical establishment is just, and it's not to say that all, you know, again, it's not an overarching theme. It's just I feel like there's a huge disservice to people because we're not looking at the whole picture as you described.
Well, and the system is not like the people in the system, it's the system itself. So it's the
Yeah,
people who put on the system that make the people in the system believe that the system is the way to go when it's not.
right. 100%.
If
Yeah,
that made any
exactly.
sense.
We all, you know, everybody in healthcare, I'd say most people who get into healthcare do it because they want to help people and they want the best for them. It's just that this is what's being taught, right? Like
Mhm.
even you say, oh, you weren't with the nutrition. The same thing with me. And the thing is nutrition and exercise can play a huge role in your experience of mental health and anxiety. Like just being dehydrated can cause you to feel anxious in your body. And for me, one of my main struggles was that a lot of the time they would say, well, what's causing your anxiety, right? Like, what are you so stressed about? What are you anxious about? I'm like, I don't know. I just have this overwhelming feeling in my body. And so I think, you know, they need to take a more holistic outlook where even mental health, sometimes it can be related to physical health, like looking into the body and mind connection more.
Yeah, 100%.
The Trinity, mind,
Yeah,
body, spirit.
mind, body, spirit.
Mind, body, spirit. What has been your like most aha like realization? Like, wow, this was a major lie.
Real
Mm.
talk. Simmer on that. Take your
Ooh.
time.
Yeah, take a second if you need to. Because you
I
know
just,
what? In the levels of awakening, we go through peeling the layers and we find out so many lies, so many untruths. And you know, some are bigger than others, and some are just like, whoa, I need a minute to like reprogram my mind here because it was all messed up. Like, have you had any of those experiences? And if so, like what was your most wow?
yeah, I feel like I've had a ton of those experiences. And like, honestly, a lot of the time when I'm reading stuff, even still, I'll be like, what? Wow. And that's half the time why I love so much about what you guys are posting. It's so awakening to everybody. So thank you guys for all the work that you do with this.
You're
But what
welcome.
comes to mind for me, like as a big kind of aha moment, was the idea that we're not just like a blank slate when we're born and that we can carry some generational stuff with us. And
Hell yeah.
so yeah. So coming to this understanding really allowed me to understand my own situation from a deeper level, because a lot of the things that were unexplained by just examining my own life had a lot more explanations when I was able to look into generational history, like my mom's life, my grandma's life, you know, my dad's life, all those things, as well as even past lives or however you want to look at it, other lives that we've experienced.
Mm-hmm. Where do you place yourself now as far as like if you said that you had become an atheist, you said that you had like gone against religion, etc. Where do you see yourself now? Like if somebody asked you, hey, where do you stand as far as spirituality? Like where are you on that scale?
That's a great question. I would say at this point, I'm just really open. Like I am very open to everybody's different understandings of it. Like I'm so interested in exploring the different religions, the different views, like from both energetic and spiritual aspects of it. So I would just say very open. I really do believe in that word. I'm not as much of an atheist as more like I do believe that we have a creator, that this universe is here by design instead of just like some mistake that I was thrown into. And after I'm done here, I'll be gone.
Right.
but I wouldn't say that I have like, I wouldn't call myself like a Christian or a Buddhist, or that I belong to any sort of
Organized
religious
religion.
denomination. I think
Mhm.
there's merit and truth to all of those. And so I'm fascinated by them, but I just think that they were taken and used for ways of control instead of for like the enlightenment and really the purpose they were meant to serve originally.
Right, right. Which is what I mean. I personally, that's what I talk about all the time. But
Well, yeah, and I think too, like again, talking about the scientific method. I mean, hypothesis, you have to prove it, you have to back it up, the data, blah. But it's like I'm curious because I know for me, like we talk about all this time. There's a knowing, right? There's an intuitive, absolute knowing when you hear the truth. I think that you know it, right? Like there's
you
no,
feel it.
you feel it, and you can't. It's like love, right? Like you can't explain the emotion of love. I mean, you can try, but it doesn't do it justice if you truly are in love. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So it's like I'm curious for you, in that regard, like do you feel the same way? I mean, as you've grown spiritually, are there just moments where you just know? Like there's no science, there's no facts, you just know it to be true. You know what I'm saying? Does that make
Like a
sense?
remembering. Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, totally. And so like a big part of that was like bringing it back to that original sentence with Eckhart Tolle, that once I read that, I was like, I know that there is a difference between me and myself and that I am multidimensional. I'm so much more than I've imagined up until this point. And it was sort of like this inner reawakening, it felt like. Um, and similarly, like reading things like the emotion code, where they break down like trapped emotions and how that can affect your energy field. That was like a huge aha moment for me, where I was like, oh, I feel like I've known this before. And like, this is what
Right.
I've been looking for and trying to find. And so,
Right, right, right.
yeah.
That feeling, I love that feeling. And that's like when I teach syncretism, it's putting all of these different religions, these different theologies, these different beliefs, these different science, the different mythologies, fairy tales, and showing how they all have the same common denominator and how they're all freaking the same. It's like this one big soup that everybody has just separated and been like, this ingredient is the ingredient. No, this ingredient is the ingredient. It's like, no, these are all ingredients to like one thing. And it was when I saw and understood that at a deep level that I felt like that I was like, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. This is truth. Like I know it like deep down inside. Like my whole body's moving in a way like, yes, and that's that feeling you're talking about,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
Yeah, yeah,
100%.
yeah.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. And another thing that comes to mind for me also, because you have the poster behind you with the chakras there, and that was a huge thing for me as well, like awakening to the chakras, because even, a lot of the physical discomfort that I would feel was in my like digestive lower belly area. And I started to realize that a lot of these fears and anxieties are related to that sacral chakra, as well as sometimes, the solar plexus energies can come in through the heart. Of course, it's all interrelated, but
Right.
understanding that side of the system was like another moment where I was like, like, why is nobody else explaining the body in
Right.
this way? Like,
Especially when you know that you have these like 7 major glands. And it's like, well, if you have these 7 major glands and they all have like their own little energy bubble, that they correspond to, just like we have our own aura or energy that we correspond to. It's like the fractal of it all. Then you're like, well, that makes sense. Like, but nobody says that. They're like, oh, here's the 7 major glands.
Yeah,
What about the freaking chakras?
yeah, I remember with her, she's showing me and explaining the chakras to me. She's got a pendulum, right? And the pendulum, you move it up the chakras and, it would spin, or it would spin counterclockwise or clockwise. And then
Or not move.
or when it was stuck, like you could literally see the tension in the line hanging from the pendulum. Have you done this before?
mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah.
So like for me, it was like,
He
holy
was
shit.
like, whoa.
Like this is real. And I'm watching her hand. I'm like, she's not moving this thing. This is amazing.
And that's when
Yeah.
when I started with Reiki.
I mean, that was a long time
Yeah,
ago.
yeah.
That was
That's when
probably like
that's when I
18 years
did.
ago,
No. With the chakras?
15 years ago. I don't know.
Yeah, who knows
It was
about
when you were
time.
working with Desi's mom
Oh,
back then.
wow.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was
see?
like 16 or
You
17.
forgot.
Ooh,
Yeah.
So many
that's
years.
A long
awesome.
time ago.
I mean, we've been together forever. It's like it all feels kind of the same. Um so is your husband now more like, I know he's open, but like I know that he was open too and just kind of like, okay, you do your thing, but like now we've kind of merged to where he understands it and can dissect it in a scientific way and I can dissect it in an energy way, but we're both saying the same thing, because we've kind of grown together in that way. And I feel like that's, you guys are like on that path, to like, you're both learning different things, but you're going to come to a point where you realize that everything that you're learning is like parallel and the same, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And I mean, I like that sometimes you say it in different ways, because I feel like, especially on this journey of learning and discovering, oftentimes we'll be saying the same thing, but like arguing about the same thing.
Yeah.
You're saying it in different ways. Do you guys
Yeah.
notice that too?
We
Yep.
realized that all of our fights, like especially the ones where our ego and was like battling, it was just directly a mirror. It was just a mirror, and we were fighting ourselves, and we were like saying the same thing, but like having to, I need you to see it my way. It's like, no, I need you to see it my way. And it's like, we're both right. Like, we just have different ways of seeing it. And it took
Yeah.
us how many years to learn that? Like, we
12,
would fight like that
15.
all the time, not understanding we were saying the same thing in just different ways. Until recently. And
That
that
was about
just,
7 years ago.
yeah, but that just changes like everything. Cause I mean, the way you communicate, the way you fight, the way you not fight, like all of
Yeah.
that has a lot to do with it.
Yeah, for sure. And your husband's an RN, right?
Yeah. Well, he's a RPN,
RPN.
and
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah, so
the
he's big.
nurse.
He's big into the science.
Yeah, exactly. And so, I mean, honestly, I was big into the science too. Like, I came from a research psychology background. So all the things I was like, it has to be proven and all that. But also, while I was in that like scientific discipline, I started to see the holes in science of like, okay, but if this is going to be scientifically proven and like peer reviewed, then it has to be funded by so and so and go through X number of things. I'm like, well, doesn't that seem like we're just slowing the process, and certain important things are probably getting missed
Right.
Or censored.
or censored?
What about your clairaudience? You said you were hearing voices and stuff. So I mean, I'm sure like if most of people don't know, but that's clairaudience where you hear. Did that come back?
Yeah, so I mean, I've been slowly working with like reawakening to all of those gifts. Like, one of the things I guess I've been wanting to come back, but I've been just sort of surrendering to the process of maybe it never will, is that like clairsentience, I think they would say, which is the
The
seeing.
feeling. Oh,
Oh, okay.
clairvoyance.
Clairvoyance, there we go.
Mm-hmm.
And so just because I'm like, how did I allow my overwhelm to like let me let go of such a special gift, which I now recognize today. But the other gifts definitely have started to come back. I mean, sometimes when I'm doing energy healing sessions with people, I'll hear a voice that's not my own, and it usually resonates with them in some type of way. I'm not at the point where I can like call in a specific person yet. One of the things that really does come across for me is the clairsentience, I guess you would say, then, is the feeling.
Mm-hmm.
So like, especially if I'm doing like an energetic work with somebody, I can often feel what's going on in their experience. Or if I'm doing hypnotherapy with them, I feel like I'm in the moment with them. Like the one
Right.
moment, we're on a boat, I like feel my body swaying back and forth and things like that.
I mean, and usually they're all tied together. So once you start awakening one and the other starts to, then they all kind of have this like level of awakening where like I'm claircognizant, where I just know things, and it's like crazy because all the time they're like, well, how do you know? I don't know. I just know. I don't know. And it just comes to me. But I also am clairvoyant. So that one I feel like I have more control over, I think, because the claircognizant is like, I don't know where it's coming from. And it's like, I just know, but there's like no answers, versus when I see something, then I'm like, oh, well, it came from there, versus I don't know when I say things and if I know them or not. It's a very different Claire, I would say. But that one has started to help me with all the other ones, because I've been not developing it, surrendering to it, just being more accepting to the fact that it's there. And so that's helped with all the other ones. And so that's why I'm saying, like, once you start working with one or two and really developing them, the rest are, because everybody has these abilities. It's just a matter of how much we're awakening them.
Yeah. And you know what? I know that I blocked it out personally, because even, when I was at the height of my anxiety, one of the symptoms that I would have when I was in a panic attack was actually blacking out. So I would lose my entire vision. So I know that this is something that, I don't know, I feel it's something that I'm meant to work on with this like eyes, the whole seeing thing.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm just sort of like patient with the process, and really, at least now I'm learning more about it and accepting it, as opposed to, like seeing a flash of light and being like, oh, that's nothing, I'm just going crazy, or
Right.
worrying that maybe, that was one of the things too with this scientific thing. Sometimes when they give you diagnoses, it brings up even more fear.
Yeah.
Like, right? Like, is this thing I'm experiencing a disorder? Like, am I going to end up in a mental hospital? And then, especially as a kid, I would watch CSI and they have, stories of those people who have mental disorders and then go and kill people. I'm like, is this going to be me? Am I going to end up, you feel out of control. So awakening to it as an experience and being able to gain that control back over it instead of feeling like this is something happening to me. It's
From
almost like
victim
something.
to empowerment, right? Like
Yeah.
you've taught a lot about, or talked a lot about empowerment. You've taught also about empowerment. What was it that you were doing before this that had to do with empowerment? What was it called?
Yeah. So before this, I was doing, my Instagram is called Braless and Beautiful. And so when I was young, I ended up getting a breast reduction at age 18 because I was like having my collarbone dislocate, all this severe pain. And even after I got this reduction, I was still experiencing the pain from wearing bras after, like my ribs dislocating and all these different things. And so I was kind of like, screw this whole societal idea that we have to wear a bra to be socially acceptable, to be seen in public, to, it goes beyond just to look a certain way and be pretty. Oftentimes it feels like, no, I can't go out if I have this extra movement, who's going to stare and all these things. And so I wanted to empower others to feel confident in their natural bodies, no matter what their size was. Braless isn't just for small boobs. So that was the original empowerment that I was doing.
That she empowered me with that.
Really?
That she was the one that remember when I stopped
No
wearing
shit.
bras?
Are you kidding me? Are you serious right now?
Babe,
Really?
yeah, hold on. I remember I told you that I had messaged her because I had like sent her a bunch of likes and a bunch of I was just basically just looking at her Instagram and I was like like, and I was like, shit, let me message her and tell her I'm not stalking her. I just like, thank you for making me feel empowered, because that's when I stopped wearing bras. So she was the one that.
Wow, that's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah. And in another way, that's like another level of awakening, right? Like breaking free from this like patriarchal view that women have to wear this thing to be a lady in our society.
Yeah. And how many years has it been now since I don't wear one? Like 2018 or 2019?
Yeah, 4, 5, 6.
Me
4,
too.
5.
Yeah.
That's crazy. So I'm curious, self-care, right? Like anytime we put something out there, I mean, and I'm sure you're the same way. Like you always have your audience in mind. Like you have an intention, right? And the intention is never to act out of ego. It's never to speak out of ego. It's to, again, help people. You want to hope that someone hears something that you say and they just latch onto it, right? Which I mean, I know I have that intention every single time. And I forgot my question.
You're shaking the
I know, you got me off guard and I forgot my question.
I'm sorry.
It'll come back. Moving on. Go ahead.
That sucks.
I know, right? It does. It was a good one too. Oh, it was about your self-care.
There you go.
So I'm curious, when we set those intentions, I mean, we obviously have to go through our own self-care. We can't help other people. We're talking about the Claires, and I'm curious to know what your own sort of self-care routine is, not only from a spiritual, but just overall, if that makes sense.
Like a self-care routine?
Like in terms of, it could be exercise, it could be nutrition, it could be meditation, it could be, because you remind me a lot of, and not that I'm way ahead by any means, I don't mean it that way, but I know I was very like, when I first started really opening up to this stuff, I wanted to learn the details. Like, I want to know how it works. Like, don't just tell me we have chakras and shit and that we have this, this fluid that goes from our brain down to our sacrum and there's a pump. I need to understand. I need to know all that. I need to know the science of raising a chrism. Don't just tell me you can do it and be Christed. I need to know physically how the shit works. So so I went down this path of like learning everything. But then ultimately it was like, all right, now that you know it, what are you going to do now? There's more work. You have to do the work for yourself. Like, it's not enough just knowing. You have to, heal.
Walk the walk.
Walk the walk. So I'm curious, like, what is your walk the walk routine? Like, what do you do to make sure that, not just learning, but more on the spiritual side of how are you growing? And also, how are you taking care of yourself physically?
Yeah. I mean, so to start on the most basic level, I learned, I took personal training certification and nutrition coach one because I really wanted to learn how to take care of my body. I found that I really tend to be somebody who leans towards like escapism or the leaving pattern as a coping mechanism, to just leave my body. And, I can not eat for days and like not experience much hunger. Like, that's a very easy situation for me to do. And so really prioritizing properly, feeding my body, getting the movement out so that I'm moving around any of that excess energy. That's been really big for me, as well as doing more movement that's not just, muscle building and to get fit, but also for an energetic basis. So doing more like yoga, something I do even just working at home all day is the, what do they call it? The 5 Tibetan rituals, which helps to like spin your chakras around and increase your energy.
I've never heard of that.
Yeah. So if you look them up, there's 5 different exercises. Maybe they're called the 5 Tibetan rites. That sounds more correct. And so one of them I especially love is you just put your hands out beside you and you spin around in a circle. And so it almost gets you this feeling of like being high, just
or a kid again.
Or a kid again. And so you like, apparently it helps with the chakras. And another one is going from like downward dog to a cobra type position. And that's good for your back, just sitting all day. So those are some little things. And as well as on a more energetic level, I've started to understand that I am a very empathic person. Like my human design is projector. I have very open energy centers. So if I don't take the time to clear and to surround and protect myself, then I end up picking up a lot of things. Like if I go to the mall and it's, Black Friday or something, I come home with a ton of energy. And so, which everybody does, but learning that, that's not mine and not just taking it out on like, now screaming at the dishes or whatever it could be, taking the time to like clear that energy. So some ways I've done that is learning through water, whether that just be like in the shower or even in one of my BQH, these Beyond Quantum Healing sessions, I sort of like channeled in a water healing, like water infusion type modality from somebody I guess I knew in a past life. So I just, your conscious mind comes up and is like, this is a little silly, but I do it and I find that it makes a big difference. And one more thing, there's a million different things I could mention, but for the sake of time, like one more thing that's really helped me is the shielding exercise. So just imagining putting on like an energetic shield that protects my heart chakra, my solar plexus chakra, my sacral chakra in particular, because I find that's where I absorb a lot of the energy. So that can help sort of prevent the buildup, I find.
Have you started meditating?
Yeah, meditation is another big one. Of course, I would recommend meditating to anyone. I think with meditation, I've been liking exploring all sorts of different types of ones, as opposed to like just focusing on the breath or just focusing on the body or just focusing on more traveling, like astral traveling type stuff. I like to play around with the different types as well. And something that's been really, really helpful for me was using the emotion code to help like release trapped emotions, because one of my biggest issues was overthinking. And I started to realize that I couldn't just push these thoughts out or change the thoughts. I needed to remove some of the emotional baggage that was drawing those thoughts back in and keeping them with me. So that was another huge thing for me.
As you've gone, because you at one time, I'm sure you still are, you're big into fitness, right? In terms of, taking care of your body. And I am too. So I have some nutritional, certifications, weightlifting certification. I'm a CrossFit coach. And I'm curious to hear from your perspective. Have you found that as you've grown spiritually, that maybe, I don't want to say your belief in fitness, but the need to be working on your fitness is starting to diminish, or maybe it's shifted?
You mean for the wrong reasons?
I mean, not it could be for the wrong reasons, but
I feel like I know what you mean. So when I originally started in the fitness, I mean, a lot of it really was helpful to get out of my head and into my body. But a large part of it was that it gave me a new identity to grab onto. And so I find a lot of the time when you're anxious or depressed, you're sad of playing that character that you were playing. Like you almost need deep rest from this character that you've been trying to play. So for a little while, it gave me this new character that I could play, which for a short while was enlivening, but then eventually it becomes draining, just like any external identity that we try to take on and hold on to. Right. So, for a while I was really into bodybuilding, like don't miss a day and like get in all the protein and like hardcore, like grow my butt as big as I can get and like all the things. But I started to see it more as a health practice, and that when you are healthy and aligned from within, then that really shines through on the outside, instead of just, focusing on making these external changes. And so my fitness routine changed from just being like exercise and bodybuilding focused to much more holistic. And now I'll take into account like where I'm at in my cycle and like sometimes where the moon is or like my emotional health. Or before I was like, no, push through, get to the gym, get your sets in, like all that.
Can identify with that 100%. Yeah, she introduced like there's an app that I have on my phone and it's like moon. I guess it tracks the moon, but it shows you like emotionally, what is it, physically, like where you are based on your birth date astrologically. And I remember like I would have, competitions that I would do and I'm like, shit, my physical is like down here and it needs to be up here.
For the the circadian
rhythms. Yes, yes. And I asked that question because like me personally, like as I go through, the fitness level, it's like, in the nutrition, and I don't know if you're familiar with like breatharian, fruitarian, with kind of those things. And I'm thinking, man, like, some of the biggest mammals on this planet don't eat meat, and they do just fine and they don't work out. Like they're not doing the amount of fitness that I'm doing and they're way bigger than I am. Like something is off. You know what I mean? So it's like that's in my journey, I'm super struggling with the fitness aspect in terms of am I doing it for the right reasons? Or am I doing it because like
I think the fact that you keep asking yourself that is that the answer is no.
The answer is no, of course not.
Because or else you wouldn't be asking yourself that. So you're trying to find the right answer. Which I think she answered. Like if you come at it from a holistic inward towards the outward versus outward in, you'll answer your question.
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And I mean, it's so tough with all the floating around knowledge out there. It's like, what's best? Should I just be eating fruit? Like I went down that path too, for sure. And I was like, oh, like, gorillas, they're out here eating like 90% bananas. And like, we're the closest to gorillas. I'm going to start eating all bananas. And I mean,
I think we're all just trying to figure it out, and we're so open-minded to trying different things, which I think is awesome because that's how you end up finding what's right for you, because we're not all the same and we all do different things. But why not listen to this or listen to that? That's how I am when it comes to all these rabbit holes and these things that people call conspiracies, right? And it's like, no, if there's people that believe certain things and they're heavily believing on it, I want to know why they believe it, because I want to see it from their point of view so that I can understand them and them. So I can understand them and them. So I can understand them all, right? So I'm very open to just looking at what's out there and then discerning for myself, like, okay, well, this works, or this feels right, or this feels like truth, and then that's where I feel like you are right now with this, like, I realized that things weren't the way I thought. And now I'm very open to what is, because I have no idea. Or maybe you do have an idea now, but you're just like, you know what? I didn't. So now I'm just open, like a sponge pretty much, which I think is awesome because that's how we learn. I think once we put these like barriers of, I don't want to know that, you miss out on the possibility of understanding so much that could have been behind, the wall that we're not really passing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, totally.
Yeah, and I know for me, like I appreciate so much because again, I keep going back to this. We're a little older, but internet wasn't
Did
around.
it get you when she said she was 25?
No, but because I think it speaks to technology, opening up human consciousness to the sense that, when we were growing up, we didn't have the internet. The internet came out, I think, when I say came out, but the internet became mainstream like right around 9th, 10th grade for me, which would have been like 95, 96. And, even though this spiritual journey is such that, when you learn information then, like people were weird, like, you know what I mean? Like they were off. They were like considered like woo woo or quacky or something like that. And, then, looking at you, I would never make that assumption, right? Like I would never look at you and think, okay, she's kind of a weirdo. Like I look at you and I don't mean that towards people that you feel me, but I look at you and I think it opens up people's consciousness. And that's what I love so much about technology, is that it opens people up to go, okay, she has a story to tell. She can dabble in all these different things. And that helps me in my own spiritual journey towards progressing down a much faster route. And why I bring up the older piece is because I know that if I had now what I needed then, like my spirit, I'd be so much further ahead because I would have, the preconceived notions and the judgments and all the things that we have when we're younger would have just faded away.
Well, I think that's why these younger generations are waking up so quickly.
Absolutely. So I say all that to say, thank you, because I think it's cool that, we have an audience, you have an audience. I think that, um, you definitely can reach people at an age where like these changes start happening. And once they start happening, like
You
we talk
can't go
about it all the
back.
time. Like we have a 17-year-old and a 15-year-old, and they know all about this shit. I knew nothing about this when I was 15 and 17, right? All I knew was the science. And so it's like, when you're able to put that out there and you're able to change, that one person's life, and you just have this cascading effect that, changes all of society. I mean, in your own story, look what that one comment did in that book, the direction that it took you on, simply because you received a message that was in a book. And, now we can get it at the touch of a button. And it's so cool.
Yeah, we're so lucky.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
What is the one thing that you would tell people? I always word this wrong. Can you say it better
I
than
don't
I?
ask questions much better, apparently, either. That's
Nope,
okay.
I've
Just
said it in every
power through
one,
it.
but every time I say it messed up.
Go ahead. Do it.
No, because it sounds so
Just go.
morbid.
It's
I
okay.
know, but help me out here.
I will.
Like, what is your message to the world? If you get me?
It's like a beauty pageant question.
Hmm.
No, it's morbid. If this was your last time, your last message, putting something out there to the world, what would you say? Sounds so morbid.
No, it's not.
Hmm.
It's a deep question.
That is a deep question. That's a good one to think about. I mean, I think one of the big things that like especially comes to mind that I wish I could say to my younger self is just like take the pressure off and stop worrying about shit that doesn't even exist and just live and enjoy, because there's so many times that I missed out on experiences because I was caught up here. Like there was so
Yeah.
much beauty going on in my life, from like traveling experiences to me being stuck in the hotel room having a panic attack, you know?
Mm.
And a lot of this was because I think I was so attached to literally shit that wasn't real, that I just took on as like, this is my life. Like, if I don't exceed in school, then I'm not going to get a job and I'm not going to be able to support myself. And I'm going to end up living under a bridge, and like all these
That
stories
sounds
that you tell
just like,
yourself.
but I think those are all stories that we hear from society because they just repeat it to us. I mean, the teachers in school we hear it from the kids, like, well, not from my son because he's homeschooled, but from my daughter, that they're constantly saying, if you don't do this and you don't do that and you don't get to school, you're not going to be anything. You're not going to succeed. It's like, I thought you're supposed to like encourage the kids, not tell them if you don't do this, you're going to be a nothing. You know what I mean? It's like
Yeah,
sometimes it motivates kids, but sometimes it goes sour. Like it goes the wrong way when they say stuff like that.
exactly. And by the way, if you look at any of the most successful people in the world, they failed like countless times, and that's what's led them to their success. But we're not taught how to fail and how to just live. Like I feel like we're not taught how to live. We're not taught anything about like water, about love, about food, about your body. And so if I would tell myself anything, it'd just be like give myself a little shake and give the world a little shake. That's like, what is this thing that you're so stressed about, or this thing that you're so upset about? And is it even really real
Mm.
and really the essence of who you are, or is this just something that's been thrown on you and you're trying to play this part or live this life that isn't really aligned with who you really are?
And I think that's really part of the fact that we're all born into living a lie because of these big lies that are placed in society, that once you believe these lies, everything else, like your whole life, is a lie. It's kind of like you're so confused because of what society has told you the world is, that everything becomes confusing because it doesn't make any sense. And that's why you go down these rabbit holes of trying to understand life, of trying to understand truth, of trying to uncover who you really are. Like, what is my authentic self? Like, who am I underneath all of society's like bullshit?
Yeah, I think that we learn these programs, and these programs were programmed from a very young age, and we realize that these programs don't work for us. And sometimes that happens at 17, sometimes that happens at 77. And it's super sad. And again, it just goes back to the work that we're doing, is that it's helping people break those programs, because I think ultimately that's what it's all about, is just stepping away from the programs and learning that we're we're so much more than we've ever been told we are. right?
Right. We're not,
So
stop
much more.
living a lie. And like she said, go live your life.
Yeah.
Live your
Yeah.
life, love your life. Like we're all about stop and smell the roses, stop and enjoy the little things because it's all about the little things that make life like what it is, right? It's like the movie Soul. Have you seen it? The Disney movie?
Mhm.
How she's sitting there looking at the little leaf fall and she's like, "Oh, this is life." And it's like it hits you like those are the moments, those small moments. It's not about everything else because they end up becoming your memories, right? And what you end up looking back at your life when you have that flash at the end of recollecting all those memories. But sometimes we're so, like you said, in our head and so in the future and so worried that we miss out on so many of those moments.
Yeah, and so the heartbreaking part about it for me is that so many of us when we feel that we're stuck in this life that we've created for ourselves, which like when you really break it down is pretty much an illusion or just kind of made up. We feel that that is our life. And so when you feel like you hate your life or it's so overwhelming or it's so hard to be here, then it feels like the only way to escape this situation is to leave the world. And so, one of my biggest passions is helping people to overcome that because I know I've been there myself. And like I said, like I didn't think I was going to make it to 25 because I was overwhelmed living in my body. And so I wish more people would know that if you hate your life, if you don't love your life, if you're overwhelmed by your life, then it's not your life and your being here, but this illusion or character or whatever you want to call it, I guess, the storyline that you're living in. And you can change storylines and change the outcome and the feeling of your life without having to leave.
Basically, get into alignment so that you can feel what is truly your life versus the illusion of your life.
Yeah.
That's
Beautifully
a good
put.
one. I'm going to end it there. Thank you so much for joining us today. We've been, the
Yeah,
whole
absolutely.
season is all about, our spiritual awakenings because I feel like everybody has a story about their spirituality that we don't talk about enough. And, what you say can resonate with somebody else and can help spark somebody else into their awakening. So I really appreciate you sharing all your info with us.
Yeah, thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you so much for having me.
You're welcome. So we will see you guys next time in Real Talk with Casey and JoJo. Peace out.